Okay, so I'm sitting here with the Ohio River right behind me, a place I'm very familiar with from my childhood, and with this lovely lady, Callie. And would you introduce yourself?
I'm Callie Lyons, longtime journalist and author of the first book on forever chemicals. It came out in 2007.
And what's the name of the book?
It is Stain-Resistant, Non-Stick, Waterproof, and Lethal, The Hidden Dangers of C8.
A good friend of mine and colleague, Alex Cole, is who connected us. I remember him saying, oh, she wrote the book on C8, but I'm like, did she really write a book, or is that just his way of like trying to explain, you know, who you are? But you actually did write the first book on C8. And tell me what C8 is and what's just right over on the other side of those trees.
We are very near DuPont, Washington Works. It's Chemours now, Chemours, Washington Works. But C8 is the name of a forever chemical that was developed in the manufacture of Teflon, which they've been making here since the 50s.
Tell me how the C8 contamination happened, because it dispersed throughout the environment, and then it basically contaminated all the water sources, or what?
It did, and little was known about it. So basically, there's no smell, there's no taste. How would you ever know it even exists? You don't see a vapor when it's in the air. It's almost like believing in something. Well, it is. It's invisible. But there's a lot of sickness in this area. And as the government began to look closer at regulating things like Scotchgard, DuPont started to get a little nervous because they had been putting their waste in landfills right on the Ohio River. So they decided at some point, as an internal decision, not impacted by external forces like EPA, they needed to relocate those. So they dug them up and they put them on property they bought from the Tennant family. And the Tennant family continued to raise cattle adjacent to the landfill. But within a very short period of time, every one of their herd of 280 cattle died.
But not only died, they had birth defects and deformities and sores, and it was like a terrible, slow, horrible, cancerous death, right?
Right, and the Tennants have been farming that land for hundreds of years. Their family has always owned that land. So, like, what happened? What's different? Well, what had changed was their environment, because now they had a landfill, an unlined landfill, as a neighbor, feeding right into their creek, which was turning black and bubbly, and they noticed changes, but it happened very quickly. So they started to look for causes. No veterinarian would touch it. Attorneys wouldn't talk to them. The state DEP formed a committee to look, and the committee decided they didn't know how to ranch cattle. They didn't know what they were doing. They were malnourished, the cattle. That was extremely offensive to this family, yes. I can tell you. So they started making videos. They started documenting everything. And eventually they found a Cincinnati attorney who had actually always been on the other side of the fight. He was an attorney for industry. He took their case, and it was a game changer. But because those cattle died, and because the Tennant family fought that fight, we all found out that we had been drinking contaminated water since the 50s. Everyone who lives here has, and no one had a clue. It's not just that you're drinking a chemical that you didn't know was there. It's that it's a cancer-causing chemical. It changes your very body chemistry. It also binds to fat. There are a lot of effects it has that didn't make its way onto like a list of 6 conditions that we determined through a science panel were conclusively linked to exposure. There are also things that, like your ability to absorb vitamin D is diminished greatly by exposure, which mimics mental illness. That is a huge problem. It's really hard to know the difference. If you're the one suffering, it's really hard to know between vitamin D deficiency and mental illness. The effects are just the same. It's really hard to lose weight if you're exposed to C8. it binds to fat. It just doesn't allow you to. So there are all these little things that diminish quality of life for the people who live here. And there are other trends that you notice. Women here who have miscarriages, they don't have one, they have 5 or 6 or 7 miscarriages before they're actually able to carry a baby to term. And you know, for a woman, sometimes your worth is based on that, especially when we're young and that's our focus, right?
Yep.
The overall effect for the community is devastating. Whether you're looking at the development of cancer or other diseases, or whether you're looking at these related effects that are somewhat adjacent to it and might not seem like a crisis, but I assure you they are.
Is it the truth it's contaminated the whole world?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This stuff is extremely durable because of the carbon-fluorine bond. Its ability to travel through the environment is immense. It's not like anything we've ever seen. And the devil we know brings to light the fact that in order to compare our contaminated blood to, clean blood, they had to go back to banked blood from Korean War soldiers. They had to go back that far to find unexposed blood to compare.
To C8. Unexposed blood to C8. And they had to go back to a soldier blood bag from the Korean War. Is that what you're saying? But I also want to highlight, if we haven't already, there's the Hollywood movie with Mark Ruffalo, The Dark Waters, which, thank you. Very much appreciate all he does to spread goodness and truth. But if you really want to know more details about the situation with DuPont and C8, The Devil We Know is just a fantastic... I'm asking you.
It's so good.
It is so good, isn't it?
And the way Mark Ruffalo
film.
talks the science, like he gets it in the movie, is impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. And the way he explains things, I'm like, I spent years trying to figure out how to explain that. And here you have it. And it was just right there in 30 seconds. Wow. I was astounded. But the details.
Of The Devil We Know.
The Devil We Know. That's, yeah. And that goes all into the story of Bucky Bailey.
Right.
And him having children and being hesitant. Because when I started the story, Bucky Bailey would say, I'm never going to put a kid through this. I won't be having kids. So that was gratifying to see that change. Because he has had beautiful babies that are perfectly fine. It's wonderful, yeah. And there's no real easy way to get rid of it. It's slippery. It kind of mimics natural substances and clings to them. It's very hard to get rid of. I think techniques are now being developed. But when the conversation began to surface in the public's awareness, there was no such thing. There were not techniques for getting rid of it, for remediation.
And that's why they're called forever chemicals. This is kind of like origination point of forever chemicals, which are PFAS or PFAS, whatever you want to, PFOA,
Right.
Here, starts here.
Well, it started with Manhattan Project, but then of course, we're going to apply that at science after World War II. We're going to apply that to consumer applications, and that's why they built DuPont Washington Works. So really, that's the proliferation of it all over the world.
Starting from more, of course. Okay, so then the other thing I wanted to point out was, and this is the part I just can't handle. It's one thing, like it was widespread in the environment, so that's the lasting legacy in pollution, which means that the majority of people in this area still have contaminated water that they're still drinking, or is that not a true statement?
No, we all do, yes.
And the water treatment facilities can't take it out. DuPont or Chemours DuPont hasn't been made to invest the money to clean the drinking water. It's not possible. Like, what's the situation with the water currently?
What we're doing now is filtration. And so filtration will only ever reduce your levels. It won't eliminate the presence of the chemical. So it grabs as much as it can. But of course, filtration materials become saturated with time. And if you don't change out the materials often enough, you end up with water that's more contaminated.
You mean if they don't change the filter and aren't monitoring it properly, the water becomes more contaminated?
Exactly.
Is that happening? Do you know?
No, that's not happening. No.
Okay.
And DuPont, because of the class action lawsuit here, has been made responsible for not only building these filtration plants, but also for changing out the carbon. So as long as the water companies are diligent about calling DuPont when it hits the trigger, which actually means a little bit is getting into the public water supply. A very little bit, but it's everywhere. So every bit of contamination counts. As long as they're staying on top of it and making sure that DuPont changes it out when it's time, the water is reasonably clean. It does vary a little bit from one district to the other because some cities and some water districts are simply more diligent about how quickly they change out the carbon.
But what about private wells and springs in the area?
There have been some remedies for those, but usually they also depend on granular activated carbon. But in like a household filtration system, it's very imperfect as long as we're relying on filtration. And at the heart of that is because you're not eliminating it. It's still there. You're reducing it, but you're not eliminating it.
So then the result of, the Tennant family, and then there was a middle or elementary school gym teacher that got involved because he was seeing deformities or birth defects in children and impacts.
He noticed the community seemed to be getting sicker and sicker, and all of a sudden he got this weird letter from the Lubeck Water District saying there's this manufacturing chemical in the water. He just wasn't satisfied with the answers he was getting. So he contacted the attorney who had been representing the Tennant family, and that was the birth of this class action lawsuit.
And what was the result of that?
Well, as a result of that, one of the remedies was the C8 Health Project. That meant that 70,000 local people contributed their blood and medical histories. And that information was all assessed by a panel of epidemiologists called the C8 Science Panel.
Okay.
And they drew certain conclusions from that. And the conclusions they drew formed the basis for what would happen next. So they conclusively tied to exposure in this community from these substances 6 health conditions. If you have one of these 6 conditions, that then gave you the ability to file a personal injury suit against DuPont that they weren't supposed to fight because the science was already there. The panel, the health project had proven this link to those conditions. So people were supposed to be able to basically submit their claims and be eligible. Yes, yeah. Yes. That ended up being settled in bulk instead of on a case-by-case basis. Because the first 3 cases that went to court, DuPont lost miserably. So, and they were tough cases. They were very tough cases. One in particular was a woman who had kidney cancer. Industry tried to blame her weight, knowing that this panel of world-renowned epidemiologists said this is exposure-related. You're likely to develop this disease. You're this likely to develop this disease, much more likely than the rest of the world if you're exposed to this and you live here. So, DuPont, they continued to fight it until they finally just settled. It was interesting to watch locally. Really, the whole thing has been. But when we were in the midst of the C8 Health Project, it was common grocery store chatter to compare numbers.
Of what your levels were?
What your numbers were. Well, my husband was this, and mine was this. And so people were already comparing notes and trying to draw conclusions. You know how it is when you don't have any information, you just have a number.
Yeah.
And you would assume the higher the number, that's got to mean something bad, right? So for the longest time, there was no information to put to those numbers.
But isn't it true that the health study resulted from the class action lawsuit that they determined that they wanted the money to be used for this long-term health study, the largest in U.S. history?
Absolutely.
That's so amazing. And that says why I love West Virginians. I mean, honestly, I love West Virginians, and there's a perfect example of one. It makes me want to cry because they get shit on so often. I don't know how else to say it. That's terrible. But, they've just what this one company did, but exploited since the beginning for energy, for coal.
Oh, absolutely.
They're the nicest people. You come here.
Appalachians
So nice.
have
I was
been
just in Charleston.
repeatedly poisoned. They tried to poison them out of existence, and Appalachians come back hardier every time and just get tougher and more in your face with it. So it is incredible that here in this place, they came up with this remedy that was actually an answer. It was the scientific answer that we needed because industry had always denied any health effects whatsoever. There are none, is the claim, until the science panel came forward with their results. And it was a long wait. It was 7 years. When you're giving your blood, you think maybe you're going to get a call like in 10 days or less, right? And maybe if you're a part of a study, you might think maybe it's going to take longer. Maybe it'll take a year. There just was a lot of work to be done. And they compared it not only to other members of the community, but also to any available science.
How does that work for people in this region? Or
you are entitled to medical monitoring. So what that would include would be a screening that would find out how much C8 is in your blood. And then throughout your life, ongoing monitoring for those 6 conditions to see if you develop them. It was determined based on these 6 communities. So if you live in one of these 6 communities for at least a year prior to 2004, you're a member of the class and you didn't have to sign up for anything at all. So you can usually verify that by tracking your address records. The water company can help you prove that. But you go to C8 Medical Monitoring online, and you can sign up through there, and they will help you and your doctor go through the process of, and DuPont pays for the whole thing. It would be an enormous expense to bear privately. But DuPont is bound by this class action and the agreement that came from it. And that's what they agreed to before they knew what the conclusion of the science panel would be. See, there were 2 things on the hook here. One of them was they would forever change out the carbon material in the filtration systems if it was linked to disease. And then the other end is that they would provide medical monitoring for the impacted public.
wow.
If it was linked to disease.
And it was.
And it was.
So they're still providing medical.
Very few people take advantage.
Why?
I don't know if they don't know about it or if they're not comfortable with the process. It's really simple because you just go online and sign up and you can set your appointments that way and everything. And most doctors in this area are
know about it.
Yeah, they're on the list. They're not going to offer it to you because it's the result of a lawsuit, okay? So it's kind of out of their purview, if that makes sense. But yeah, very few people, and it's always been true, very, very few people take advantage of the medical monitoring. Unfortunately, that's where the remedy ends. If you are diagnosed with a disease, then it is up to you to pursue a personal injury claim. It's not an automatic thing that happens. And of course, that can be a grueling process. A lot of attorneys now only want to take the cancer cases.
But so you develop, you're part of this medical monitoring program, you develop a disease. Do they then pay for your medical care ongoing?
No.
I want to punch something or somebody. Smack, kick. Executives, go to jail for your freaking rest of your life. And no, they're not. They're running around. I want to say the bad word, but I'm going to stop. Yeah, come on. It's so hard for me to keep it in. Okay, sorry, I had to have a little fit.
It's heartbreaking to see a young person. I know a young man who has testicular cancer. He cannot afford the treatment. He can't afford to do anything about it. He paid for one session of radiation, and it was akin to paying to be tortured. It's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. So we know that it was caused by industry. We know it's a result of exposure. We know what chemicals caused it. Any legal remedy is only going to go so far. Unfortunately, it does not go to medical care. Oh, certainly, and it was a valiant fight. And as I say, DuPont agreed to these conditions without knowing the outcome. But they thought they were going to win.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, I don't think they expected people to sign up for the health project like they did. And it was no problem for the organizers to get 70,000 people. Now, people did get paid a stipend for participating. And it was $400. That's a significant amount of money for any family around here.
Yeah.
And if you have multiple family members going in for testing, a real boost, and probably more than they would have been able to get had that money been just, had they said, don't worry about a health project, let's just split it with everyone. They wouldn't have got that much money. Everybody might have ended up with $40 each. I mean, it's a very small amount of money. But so for people who are willing to put themselves through this, contribute their medical histories, they got a report. Like anyone who participated got a full report of this. First of all, the battery of tests that was run on the blood samples, amazing. It's not something anybody would or could ever pay for. So there's a lot of valuable information in there for an individual and for them to share with their doctors. Mm-hmm. A lot of undiagnosed disease was caught. Within 24 hours, these people were notified. It saved lives.
Wow.
Yes, I get chills thinking about that even.
Unrelated diseases.
Related or unrelated?
See, at that point, we didn't know.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the whole, we didn't know about causation. We didn't know what the conditions were going to be. But if you were a participant and they red flagged something, I had a friend who had undiagnosed cancer, and it was advanced. He only found out. He didn't have the means to go get tested. He wasn't doctoring. That's the thing around here. People don't doctor. A lot of Appalachians don't doctor. They don't really trust doctors.
Include me in that.
This caught a lot of disease. A lot of disease. So the information it provided was amazing. And like I said, it's beyond what anyone could pay for. At the time, you couldn't even have your blood tested for C8. You couldn't go to a local doctor and say, I want to know how much is in my blood. So that was a real benefit for the people of this community to be able to find out and have a number to put to it. Now, as I was mentioning, that number didn't necessarily mean anything until much later on.
Right.
But the fact that they were able to link any disease at all, that was a win. The first one we knew about was testicular cancer. That was, and I started to cry. I remember that moment very well. Because that was it. That was the proof we had all been looking for and told didn't exist. Because we went literally in that moment from no human health effects to testicular cancer.
I have chills.
It was, yeah. Yeah, so the science is there to back you. But if you don't have a cancer diagnosis, there are very few attorneys who are willing to take those cases.
You gotta get sick to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it. I mean, there has been shade thrown at people who collected. Is $500,000 enough to pay for your cancer? No way. That won't pay for your ongoing care to live the rest of your life. No. Any settlement was cut in half because that's what the attorneys got. It's just how the system is, right? So when you hear somebody got $1 million because they had kidney cancer, no, they got $500,000. And that isn't even going to touch what they've been through or what they're going to have to endure for the rest of their lives.
Or pay for in medical expenses if they don't have good insurance.
Absolutely. 2 of 7 women who worked in the Teflon division at this particular plant, within a very few years, their babies both had very similar birth defects.
Yeah.
And they were devastating. And Bucky Bailey will forever be my hero. He's just one incredible human being. And someone who has never collected $1. Not a member of the class, not entitled to sue. And after his mother had him, DuPont denied she even worked in the Teflon division. it's just very sad. So, but there is another person out there who had some similar, not quite as severe birth defects. These birth defects are notable not only because of the occurrence of them and the reaction, which was DuPont pulled all the women out of the Teflon division. So clearly the company thought something was going on.
Yeah.
It also is very similar to what we see in animals when birth defects are provoked by exposure.
Okay, the only thing that I keep thinking is Chemours, I'm going to just say DuPont, now Chemours. Change the chemistry composition a little bit so they don't call it C8, but they're still making something very similar called GenX. And thanks to concerned citizens and the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, like they're still discharging.
I think they wanted us to get like all caught up in the shiny new thing of GenX, and let's just call it that, which has nothing to do with the carbon bond of C8, right? So get away from the technical language. GenX, it seems sleek somehow and very modern. It actually gets into your blood much easier. Just as likely to make you sick, maybe even more likely to make you sick. It leaves your blood easier. But the thing is, the length of the carbon, which that's what C8 refers to as the 8 carbons, the length of the chain doesn't matter. It's the carbon-fluorine bond. It's that indestructible bond that was contrived for the Manhattan Project.
And they're talking about expanding it when they're right now in violation of the legal discharge. That's the part that well, how does that make you feel?
20 years ago, I would have been surprised. 20 years ago, I thought, if you push the truth out there and you put it before the public, what will happen will be what needs to happen. And the polluting will stop. And people used to say to me all the time, if this was really a thing, the EPA would come in and do something about it. That day, no, that's not how it works.
Nope.
Not at all. You would for sure think after Dark Waters and the kind of reaction that got from people, that it would be going on no more. But believe me when I tell you, when it stops, we will all know. It will be such a huge announcement. They've never made that announcement. Now they've said intended to stop, intended to curb it, we'll reduce it by this amount by this date. There's really been very little talk of completely not ever using it, stopping it, remediating it altogether. There's no talk of that. It's not. If we stopped everything right now, we'd still be cleaning it up for 2,000 years. But it hasn't stopped. They've always had, it's a spill. They've always had spills. So there's what they report as part of the discharge permitting process. And then there are these incidents that happen that they call spills, and they're massive. It's all based on self-reporting. I mean, I suppose DuPont gets a point for reporting. There are other companies that falsify records or don't report at all, even though they're obligated to. The whole thing is just, it's dismal for the community. And if someone looks at the history of forever chemicals and they look at us, they think we have solved it because they think we've been in the fight long enough that by now, surely it's no longer a factor. Even the locals think that. Nothing could be further from the truth.
To be clear, how many years? When was it? When did the tenants raise awareness about it?
They would have become aware late 80s, early 90s. It took them years to get to Rob Watt and the solutions that would follow. Well, growing up in Western Kansas, and this reminds me of the first time I came to West Virginia, there's this smell in my hometown, okay, because of the feedlot on the edge of town. And whenever anyone goes, oh, what is that smell? Somebody in the crowd always says, that's the smell of money. The first time I came to West Virginia, and that chemical smell hit me, I was like, what is that smell? And whoever it was with me said, that's the smell of money. So it's ironic that these years later, I hear of this, the failure of this entire herd of cattle that belongs to this one family. That's a devastating loss, first of all. Now, if you're from Kansas, that's a really devastating loss. Because here the tenants are like one of a few families involved in that, and a very small part of the economy. In Kansas, that's a whole different scenario. It just looks completely different. And the death of an entire herd, when a fallow cow is worth $1,000, so like a cow that's absolutely no good to anyone except for their meat is $1,000. I mean, this is big money that we're talking about, right? How can that kind of destruction be caused and no one be talking about it?
Yep.
That has never made sense to me as a Kansas girl. It's never made sense to me. That was one of the major factors that got my attention. Another was finding out that since we lived in Belpre, Ohio, my children and they were babies, literally babies at the time, we were drinking the water. Mm-hmm. And I found that as I was covering it.
I mean, you were a journalist with the Marietta Times?
Yeah, with the Marietta Times.
And then, because of what you were learning and discovering, you decided to write this book on C8.
Yeah.
And tell me the name of it again.
It's called Stain-Resistant, Nonstick, Waterproof, and Lethal, The Hidden Dangers of C8.
And how long did that take you? And did you have any idea what you were getting into or what you were going to find?
I had no idea. And my thought was, I just want to put everything available about this into one place so that my friends and neighbors can access it like a reference. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that they would not want it. I mean, that was really the outcome. The people here were not interested at all. It was academia that first embraced the book. And that makes sense if you are looking at big picture. I didn't know when I started the book this was going to be an international concern. I had no clue. I thought this was just us. Like, I thought this was a local problem. Mm-hmm. And far from it, because now we're talking about every body of water, every living thing. I had no idea. I probably wouldn't have tried. I would have thought that's way too big for me. Way too big for me. And I didn't know, there are a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know how it would be received by the community, how I would be treated, how my kids would be treated at school. Like, we don't talk about that. Little kids in grade school, even. Yeah, I just had no idea. I got a job several years later in radio, a different radio station. This, several years after I had written the book. They didn't want me to use my real name on the air. Okay, I mean, I needed a job, whatever, right? So they decided I should use Callie Waters, which was a more direct path to the truth. That fooled absolutely no one. So, interesting choice. For a while, it made things harder when the kids were growing up, no doubt. But totally worth it. Totally worth it in the end. And my kids even think so, because there have been times where I've been like, we kind of went through it there because I wrote that, that one thing. But they've always been all in. And it's very sweet because they were so young and had to be exposed to all this talk of pollution. And, there would be parties at school where I'd get a call from the teacher. Can they really not have microwave popcorn? Why? Why are they not allowed to have that? And my poor little children are worried about whether or not they can eat microwave popcorn, which kids should never have to worry about. Right. It was just one of the known routes of exposure that became obvious to me very on. What I had learned at that point was that the scientists studying it would no longer consume microwave popcorn. And I was like, okay, no more. We're not doing that anymore either. I've always had very, very good people guiding me along the way. Scientists from the Environmental Working Group. Mm-hmm. Dr. Bloom from the Green Science Policy Institute. Mr. Griffin, who was the manager of the Little Hocking Water Association, who for years and years and years put up with doing conversions for me because I don't math very well and I was very nervous. And you can't be wrong if you're reporting on DuPont. So I would go to him with these, now does this mean this many? Every time.
Aren't you amazed kind of that you were able to pull it off, that you actually stuck with it? And
how did it happen?
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was getting into. That's youth and ambition. There's a benefit to having no idea what you're getting yourself into, because you might not do it if you knew. I talked to them the whole way. I was in communication with them all along. I have been at the plant site for a tour.
Because she was a journalist, right? Because you were a journalist, yeah.
And, they quit doing plant tours very shortly after that. But it was amazing. I was starstruck. This is the place where Teflon is made. I mean, I was a single mom. That was not lost on me. The significance of how much easier these products make our lives. Wow, like this is the place. And it had not yet set in all the harm. Luckily, I learned about that gradually, as the community did. It would be too much to learn about it all at once. By the time I knew, I could identify people I knew I had lost to it. And I guess the thing that gets me as an ongoing concern is that we have generations that are unaffected, like younger generations that were not covered by the suit. And young women have almost entirely been overlooked. And in particular, their capacity for having reproductive issues. It's simply not addressed at all. You can't address everything that's going to affect a population exposed to something like this with one class action lawsuit. They did just wonderful, groundbreaking work. And it truly is something I hope will be a model for how other suits are, resolved in the future, because it was based on science. It wasn't based on legal arguments. That was huge. We needed that for this community to have some kind of peace over what was really going on. The tenant family was not treated well. They had to change churches a few times because they weren't welcome, because of everything that was going on with their cattle. Now, they had suffered the loss. They were the victims. But people thought their story was contrived. They thought it was fabricated. You have workers who've been exposed every single day with no protective equipment whatsoever, and they are not getting sick. And they will come home and say, look, I was in it up to my elbows today in C8, in the powder. I'm not sick, I'm perfectly fine. And then you have other people who inexplicably come down with these horrible, horrible diseases. Yeah. And it seems very random. It didn't appear to be related to one specific thing. So the tenants caught a lot of shade over that. Their efforts were not welcomed.
Not by everyone. Some people must have.
A few. A lot of people took it as a threat to the economy and their livelihood.
And their jobs.
Yeah. For the longest time, it was, be quiet or DuPont will move away. In fact, when I got my first job in radio, my girlfriend was moving because her husband, who was a chemical engineer for DuPont, was going to China to help build a plant. So, we thought it was entirely possible that they would pick up Washington Works and take it to a different country. Yep. And that was kind of the underlying threat. That would be devastating to the local economy.
But I also just kind of learned today in another interview in Charleston and researching a bit that companies do that. Like there's a Czech company that brought a methanol plant from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. What's it called? Liberty One, and moved it to Charleston. And now they're talking about dismantling another one and bringing it there. So, that does happen, Right. It's just insane, but they dismantle these plants and ship them across the world. So, I can understand that could have been a real fear, but, oh, man. It should never be that a community has to choose between livelihood, a job, being able to feed their children, and a clean, healthy environment to live in and work in. But that's the way, that's historically Appalachia, right?
It's accepted here.
It just shouldn't have to be.
No, it absolutely shouldn't, but it is. It's the accepted trade-off, your health for a job. I've been behind a woman in the dollar store checkout line explaining her cancer diagnosis. And I still marvel at this exchange. She explained to the cashier she'd just been diagnosed. And that, it was related to exposure. You know what? I don't care. You see my rings? You see my car? I've always lived well. They've always taken care of me. So despite all of this that you and I see a very certain way, that's a very prevalent feeling. Overwhelmingly, which I just can't, I can't quite get there. I'm outraged for her. She's not outraged. She thinks it was fair.
I do my best not to judge, but I can honestly, I don't understand. I just don't understand. And I said several times a day, even in this other interview, like, I'm just confused. It's just confusing to me. Like, but that's okay. It's not possible for me to understand anything. I don't judge. And like, I'm happy for her that she's been able to have the life she wants, but wish it didn't have to end up with her getting cancer, you know?
Yeah, I'm so sad that it was a trade-off and that we've accepted it. I kind of get where it's not going into a coal mine where you don't know if you're going to come out of the hole at the end of the day. It's remarkably similar, isn't it?
Good point.
Yeah.
Now, what were your thoughts on this new lawsuit against Chemours?
I'm really glad that someone has taken up that fight because it has evaded the public's awareness that it's still going on. People think this is a resolved situation, and it is anything but. You know, they literally think the poison is out of the water. The poison is very much still in the water, and the only thing standing between us and being poisoned are the filtration systems.
It's because they're still putting the chemicals into the water or similar chemicals.
There have always been a few people on the sidelines here who knew something was going on and have been observing and trying to figure it out. But I think the overwhelming sentiment has been, let's just keep them happy. Let's keep DuPont here. There were competing bumper stickers at one point. And one version of that was, we love DuPont Washington Works. And the opposite side said, C8 Love Canal.
Okay, so one thing I want to clarify and make sure is understood is that you said because of Teflon, this is, and how widespread that product was throughout the world, like C8 is not just a Parkersburg issue. The chemicals that poison this community, because of the products that were made from this chemical that were distributed worldwide and used in cooking, it's
in everyone's blood. It's in the blood of newborn babies who have never been exposed to anything except their mother. It's in everyone's blood. I think the EPA conservatively says 99%. I have never met one of the 1%. I've never met anybody who didn't have it in their blood, and neither of you. Since, I think it's the 60s. I mean, it's been everywhere, and the government knows that.
So meaning it's not just the Teflon pans. You talked about Scotch Guard, Rain-X, anything that's water resistant.
Yeah, anything that has like the artificial properties of being water resistant or grease resistant or stain proof, if it acts against nature, there is a good chance it's related.
That's a really great way to put it.
And as with cigarettes, we don't know a safe level. We don't know if it takes smoking one cigarette to get cancer or if it takes a whole bunch. C8's the same way. We have no idea. Exposure's inevitable.
Okay, so then if I try to tie this into the legal limits they're still exceeding from formerly DuPont, now Chemours plant, right there.
Yeah.
People should be concerned about that because it's going into the river. It's going up and raining down. But that also means that water it's getting into the rivers, it's drinking water supplies, so that's potential contamination or impacts to health and environment. But then every product that they're making with these chemicals that's made in this facility is another way that is potentially impacting and causing health and environmental harms.
Right.
And
once it's in the environment by any means, whether it's because of a consumer product or a precursor like an application, once it's in the environment, it travels incredibly well through the environment.
And it's called a forever chemical, which means like it doesn't break down and it bioaccumulates.
That's what first disturbed the EPA so much.
What?
Both of those factors, that's what disturbed the EPA, the combination of them. You can't break it down, so you can't get rid of it. And it's constantly accumulating. It's a growing issue. Little Hawking, in their pursuit of justice against DuPont, commissioned an earthworm study. And it studied how much an earthworm had in its system, and then all the way up through the food chain. And it increases on every level. So every subsequent step of the food chain has more, and babies have even more. And that's how it bioaccumulates through the system, because it's constantly accumulating and not letting go.
Meaning because a bird will eat not just one earthworm, but say 20 in a day, and then, so it's getting 20 times the level, and then, so it's got 20 times, and then something eats the bird, and trying to...
Is the bird drinking the water and eating the earthworms? Because then you have multiple routes of exposure, and if it's getting rained on, or if it's eating local produce, all these factors play in. I mean, the accumulation that is a serious issue. Early testing here showed that the factor of exposure to what was in your blood, exposure was X, what was in your blood was 105 times that. And since it binds to fat, that's another issue. Like, it's not easy to shed. Since you're not shedding and you're constantly accumulating with every round of exposure, until some of this was curbed with water filtration, I mean, these people were headed for worse and worse and worse scenarios constantly.
But not these people, the world.
This is true. Right.
These people are all of us, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
True.
Like, everybody should be concerned about what's happening here, in my opinion. I don't get it.
There's another factor that might be worth mentioning. China will no longer take our waste.
Yeah.
They quit a few years ago. And when they did that, the Teflon waste from DuPont Washington Works, which they don't want to have to deal with because they really can't legally. Like, what are they going to do? They hire a company to handle that. The company was warehousing it, just letting it pile up.
Right around here? Or?
Yeah, the middle of Parkersburg. We had a massive fire.
That's where the fire happened? That was a DuPont storage, maybe, facility?
They were contractor.
Kimmel's facility.
Yeah, they hired someone to handle their waste, and it wasn't being handled. It was being stockpiled.
And that's what caught on fire? Oh, my.
It was, yeah. And then we were pouring firefighting foam on it.
It is, I mean, I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I want to get together again and come and visit and, like, keep me updated, and, I just appreciate you so much. And where can I get a copy? I'd like to read it.
Well, I'll make sure you have one.
Okay.
Until the next one comes out. I'm rewriting it now, so I don't really know. But, yeah, I mean, it's out of print right now. I bought it back so that I could do what needed to be done.
Great.
So, I look forward to completing it, because we knew nothing. We knew nothing in 2006 when I was writing that book. Can you imagine? It was 19 years ago, I guess, right? There's so much has happened.
Right.
Yeah, so much has happened. So many good people have contributed to this cause along the way. And I appreciate your interest very much, because this is still very much a crisis.
It's still very much a crisis, and, that's why I'm grateful to Stuart and Alex and you to, like, somehow in our show Exposure be able to do just that. This is still an issue of great concern, and so thank you so much for all you've done and for being with us and helping us, spread the truth.
I just showed up, that's all. We just were here, we showed up.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
nice to meet you.
You too. Thanks.
Peace. Bye.